Yo, what's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to the podcast, another episode of Caffeine and Green with your man, Connor Cardenas. Before we get into it today, man, I just want to give a huge shout out to the title sponsors of Caffeine and Green, which are Thorn Street Brewery, coming straight out of North Park, San Diego, and Seven Seas Roasting Company, coming straight out of South Park, San Diego. Now, one of the best things about having Seven Seas Roasting Company as a sponsor of the podcast is that they've afforded me a code, which I'm going to hand over to y'all right now. So if you head over to sevenseasroasting.com, you hit that coffee tab, you're going to get my deal, which is 3 bags of coffee for $30. Now, that's a no-brainer because depending on the bag, each coffee starts at $16. So 2 bags alone is $32. So you're getting 3 for $30. You're getting a bag for free. It's a no-brainer. So head over to that coffee tab. Select any of the coffees with the exception of the Spikes roast because that is a 100% charity roast. But you're going to get to choose from our Kaha Collective, which is a Vietnamese coffee, which tastes a little bit of almond, a little of agave, very, very sweet. And then we also have our espresso blend, which is full-bodied, has a little bit of acidity, has amazing sweetness, and just a little bit of chocolate. It's fantastic. And that's our espresso 5th gear blend. And then we also have our new single origin light roast, which is a Ethiopian, which tastes of rose, blueberry, chocolate, and I think a little bit of raspberry. I think that was, if I can remember correctly. So you can get any of those 3. You're going to head over to that checkout tab, and then you're going to see that promo code area. You're going to enter my code, CANDG. That's C and G. And when you hit that checkout button, you're going to get 3 bags of coffee for $30. So again, head over there right now. Choose those 3 coffees. Enter my code, CANDG, at checkout, and you're going to get that deal. All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this guest today, this is a very, very special guest. I mean, this is, I honestly have to say that for this podcast, this has come full circle for me. My guest today, I learned about this gentleman when I started roasting coffee, and no joke, my head roaster at the time told me I needed to watch every Mill City Roaster School video that was on YouTube at the time. I'm talking season 1, barely even season 2, to learn the essentials of roasting because I was just not getting it. Of course, I am talking about the infamous, the legendary Mr. Joe Marrocco. I mean, if you know anything about specialty coffee, if you've been in it for at least a little bit of time, if you're a coffee roaster, if you are a coffee enthusiast, coffee snob, whatever you want to call it, you have definitely heard the name Joe Marrocco. To have had him on the show really it's come full circle for me. He is a wealth of knowledge. He is so smart. He knows everything about coffee. I mean, if you've ever watched any of his videos, he gets in the weeds. But that's not what we talked about the whole time on this podcast. We talked about his origins in coffee. We talked about his family. We talked about his new endeavors. It is truly, truly wonderful podcast. And Joe lives up to the hype, man. He is a wonderful person. I hope you guys get a chance to really, really just meet him, say what up. If you have questions about your espresso blend, talk to my man because he will definitely help you out. And let him come to your shop. I know he'll try it and he'll give you amazing feedback. He doesn't blow smoke. So without further ado, guys, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed as much as it was just an exciting experience for me. So without further ado, my man, Joe Marrocco. This is your time to shine, homie. Let's go. Caffeine and green. It's your boy Connor. What's good? Good. Caffeine and green. And we are live. Joe Marrocco.
What's up, Kano?
Welcome to Caffeine and Green, sir. I always start with a cheers.
Clink, clink.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that's quite refreshing. You made us some tequila drinks, did you?
This is a hotel drink. So when you're in a hotel room, you kind of use whatever's in the little mini bar. So I like to get creative.
Yeah.
And tequila. We got some white wine and we've got some Sprite.
Oh, we're like a cocktail right now.
Exactly right. Yep. So one of the drinks in lots of places in Europe, especially Spain, is just Sprite and wine.
Yep.
or soda and wine. And then a lot of times you have vermouth used as a mixer, basically, with whatever hard spirit you have. So I threw in some tequila on top of that Sprite and wine, and it's kind of nice.
Dude, it's pretty tasty. You were describing it as a little harsh at first, but I definitely think that, honestly.
Dude, it's mellow. Refreshing.
And Joe, I'm just going to get right into it.
Let's do this.
I mean, for the people who don't know who you are, I mean, if they've been living under a rock, frankly, especially if they work in coffee, they don't know who Joe Marrocco is. I don't know what you're doing with your life. But for those of you, for the listeners who don't know who you are a coffee veteran. You did the Mill City roasting videos for roaster schools. You worked for Cafe Imports. You've done a lot in coffee. You're a speaker. You speak at SCA Expo. You speak at multiple other things, the Coffee Fest, where I actually met you the first time. You're a wealth of knowledge of coffee in general, and just in general. I mean, I was telling you down at the bar, a hotel bar, before this. From the time I started roasting, my head roaster at the time, this guy Jason Bush, he was like, "You have to watch the Mill City Roasting School," and it was you and Dave.
Dave Borton.
Dave Borton.
Yep.
And
Shout out to Dave.
Shout out Dave. Yes. Hopefully he's doing well.
Yeah.
And the roasting videos were so intriguing to me, talking about turning points, talking about yellowing, browning, first crack. And then, the classic Joe Marrocco phrase was, "I'm going to get in the weeds in this," get always in the weeds. And some of these videos got long, and some of them were like relatively short, 30 minutes, 20 minutes sometimes. And then it even got into a second season. And that was with the girl with you, Eliza. Yep. And then for the first time that I met you, it was right before you left Mill City. And so now you're doing this, and that's just a little bit of background for people who don't know who you are. But for the people who do know who you are in coffee, what I wanted to start it off with is, how did it all start for you? Like, what was your obsession with coffee that really got you into it?
Ooh, that's a good question. So coffee for me is really important. And I think everybody has maybe like some thing within them that they're really good at. Many of us have the fortune to find what that is. Some people may never find what that is.
Yeah.
Really sad. Let's start
unfortunate.
On a depressing note. Search their whole lives. But more important to me than coffee is people. And coffee has been a really cool means for me to hopefully find the end, which is helping people grow, helping people be better every day at whatever it is that they want to be better at. And we live in a world where, unfortunately, there is a lot of disparity, and that disparity has been kind of born on the back of centuries of colonialism, global, colonialism, where the rich have reaped the benefit on the backs of the poor. And coffee is a very good example of that. Really, coffee is built on slavery. And that slavery is still a very real thing. We don't think of it as people in chains necessarily, but when you don't have any opportunity, you don't have equity, you don't have access, you don't have education, you don't have healthcare, you don't have any of the things that it takes to survive really a healthy life. That is pretty much a chain. And so coffee has kind of kept people in those chains for a long time, as have many, commodities and many of the things that we depend on here in the, what we would maybe refer to as a developed nation. So I like to break those chains. And I think that one of the most powerful ways to break chains is through education. And that's another thing that I'm really good at. And so I've just taken my skills with coffee and my skills with education and tried to marry them in a way that starts to make a positive impact in the world.
That's awesome. That is super awesome. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the way that you go so in depth about something that is so intricate. I mean, it's a agricultural commodity, which is what I wanted to ask you about too. I mean, there's so much more to coffee. I mean, I know I definitely haven't been to as many areas of the world that I'm assuming you've probably been to and gotten to experience at origin. But when I got to go to Hawaii and visit coffee farms, and then I got to experience a couple of different coffee farms, and then seeing it all grow and being able to pick it and taste it and touch it right off of the tree, whether it was the the fruit, like the cherry, the cascara, if you will, and then tasting it tastes a little bit like a bell pepper. You know,
Yeah,
it's
very
like
much.
kind of sweet, kind of not. And then you see the bean and how it really starts off with the outer covering. I can't think of the word right now, but like the silver mucilage around it, and then just seeing the whole thing and then seeing how it grows so organically out in the open, especially in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It was life changing for me. And I mean, was there a moment like that you had where you kind of had that moment specifically, or maybe at origin?
100%. Yeah. My first experience with that was actually before I was in coffee professionally. I was able to travel to Nicaragua in Nova Segovia in 2001. So I'm old. Everybody watching and listening, I'm old. So I was 21 years old back then, and it was a pretty life-changing experience. There had been a horrible hurricane that had come through in the late 90s, and basically many of the men in fishing villages along the coast had been caught out to sea in the hurricane and never came home. And so the women and children of the villages were basically left without any source of food, income, or, a father and husband. And so the Nicaraguan government, along with a lot of nonprofit organizations and other organizations, basically transplanted a lot of these fishermen or fisher families without their fishermen to Nova Segovia and to other places in Nicaragua and said, hey, you're coffee farmers now. We're going to give you some land and some trees, and we're going to help you grow coffee.
Wow.
And so I came a few years after that. And of course, as coffee people know, it takes about 3 to 5 years for a coffee plant to mature to where you can actually get a crop. So the crops were not yet ready. And these unfortunate folks were living basically off the land, and they had nothing. And so working with them, and I say working with them very generously to myself, because I basically was a kid just like learning and mouth dropped. But we were trying to help them become organic certified and fair trade certified and find access to the market and get things set up for whenever they did have the coffee. But it really both broke my heart and demonstrated to me very powerfully what kind of impact coffee can have. And we spoke a lot about during that trip with my group about how maybe there were different opportunities for getting more money into this community if they were able to grow better coffee, or if roasters were able to pay more for the coffee even at the same quality. And so this conversation, was very foreign to me. I'd never thought about it before that time. And I think that it was also something that was very new and kind of bubbling at that time within coffee itself. And so I came home with this just major drive to remedy this problem. Maybe that's a very white male masculine kind of thing to think of. I'm going to fix this. But that's what I came home with. I was just like, I can't exist comfortably knowing that there are other people out there existing like this, and that I have a way that I can maybe make this better.
Make a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it was not until 2005 that I actually started working in coffee, and kind of, I guess you would say, devoted my life to making coffee better, because I think that if we have better coffee, we pay more, we appreciate it more, we value the people in the supply network more, and we are more maybe accountable for how we buy and sell coffee. And so hopefully we can not have situations like those folks we're living in happen in the future.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because along with making the coffee better, you're getting better tastes, and you're getting, I mean, especially being in the United States, we have a culture behind it. So I hear you say it, and that's how I kind of think about it, because I understand it better, and I understand the work that goes into filling up just a 20-liter bucket of cherries. It could take hours.
Definitely.
And I mean, I'm sure they have it down to a science wherever they're at, but I have that appreciation now to the point where I completely agree with what you're saying about like making it better and people are going to pay more, and then it's supposed to trickle down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that.
Yep.
But the one thing that I'm always trying to impress upon the crew that at Seven Seas is that it's like, I really want you to understand how much work went into just this bean. Like, so when you're pulling a shot and you're trying to dial in and you're just like, I mean, not saying that they are, but anybody in general, if you're just keep dialing in and you're just wasting espresso, it's like, hey, we need to like be more efficient at this because we're just wasting coffee. But all that coffee grew from the planet and people picked it, put time and effort into it to get it to roasted to here, and then boom.
Yeah, it's like have a little respect.
Have a little respect, you know, in a very positive way, of course. But I mean, I love how you're saying that. So did you start with just working in a cafe, or did you like washing dishes, stuff like that?
Well, when it comes to coffee, I definitely started just working in a cafe. Now my love of coffee from a culinary perspective comes from, I guess, a different route. My dad drinks a ton of coffee.
Okay.
I mean, every day he pounds, I want to say probably 2 pots of Folgers.
Still?
Still
to today?
Actually, now he has it down to where he brews a pot of Folgers. He wakes up at like 4 a.m., brews a pot of Folgers, drinks that. Then he gets on the road, and he has 2 gas stations he stops at, and he fills up a 20-ounce cup at each stop, and he has about an hour commute one way. So I don't even know how he puts that much liquid in his body, much less like caffeine.
Yeah.
But he's a major coffee drinker, not quality coffee, but a major coffee drinker. And so as a kid, I saw him just pounding away this coffee. Yeah. And my mom was very much like, coffee is not for children. You cannot drink it. I think it was mainly because I was pretty hyperactive.
Yeah.
And she was like, I will die if this child drinks any coffee. But whenever I was with my dad, like camping or, you know, doing other things with him and my mom not in the picture, we would drink coffee. He would like slip me coffee basically and be like, okay, it's man time. And so I would, man, it's getting very masculine again. I would really relish those times with my dad. And I think, and also, you know, I'm also a flavor nerd. I don't know why or how. It's just something about my DNA. I love flavors. So
like tastes, you mean? Like your palate and stuff
definitely.
like that? Yeah.
Culinary arts are a passion of mine.
That's what's up.
So I hated the coffee, but I loved the time with my dad. I hated the flavor of it, but there was something about it that I would keep going back to because it was something. Well, I guess one thing was I didn't want to, you know, act like it was bad because that made me seem kind of weak in the eyes of my dad maybe. But also just having that time with my dad. When I really fell in love with the flavor of coffee, though, with my dad, actually, we make homemade maple syrup.
Really?
Yeah, my dad is a syrup maker, and he's really well known in his region, actually in Missouri, which is not known for syrup at all. He kind of has started a movement where now there's tons of syrup makers around his region. He was really the one to spark this and to educate people in his community of how you can just do this with maple trees in your yard.
Wow.
So we started tapping trees, and he would take just Folgers coffee, take a bonnet filter like you would get at a like for a big coffee brewer, put a bunch of Folgers into it, tie it up, and then he would dip into the sap an old like Western style or cowboy coffee brewer. It's like a pitcher, basically, a metal pitcher. And the sap is very watery. It tastes like water with just a little bit of sugar in it, but like purest sugar you can imagine, and purest water because it's been filtered through the roots of this tree from the earth. So he would dip that in, and then he would tie a string around the filter and drop that filter down into the pot of sap, and then just set that on the fire. We always cooked the syrup over a wood fire, and it would just sit there and boil, and we would pour little amounts of that that brewed coffee, basically sap coffee, and just sit there and sip it while the maple sap was boiling, and just talk and talk. And so that's when I started actually loving coffee, because the flavor of that beverage with my dad was really something special.
Well, it's quite sweet, it sounds like.
It was sweet, but it was like this is another thing I should have mentioned before. He would put 2 teaspoons in every basically 8 ounces of coffee that he would drink. So even though he drinks Folgers, he puts a ton of sugar into it. But this was without all of that sugar. It was without any kind of, adulteration other than just this natural, delicate sweetness in the background. And the coffee, for whatever reason, just tasted better brewed that way. I think it was probably since it was an immersion brewing, it didn't over extract that coffee, that nasty Folgers.
Yeah.
So you get like this coffee essence with a little sweetness, and it was just great. Yeah.
That sounds pretty. I mean, that's, as you're saying this to me, what comes to mind is like natural syrup, like a syrup, like what people are doing now. I mean, we do it at our cafe. Other cafes in San Diego do the same thing, where it's, instead of having a refined like pump sugar, like flavoring, you have a syrup now that is like a vanilla syrup or, chai syrup. And these things sweeten the coffee in more of a natural way.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. And it's, I guess, put it in perspective, maple sap, it takes 40 gallons to make 1 gallon of syrup. So basically, if you were to take maple syrup and add 40 times the water, that's how watered down the sap is. So, so it was very watery. It was basically just delicately sweet. Yeah.
Damn.
We're getting kind of nerdy off track. Sorry.
No,
about that.
that's no. Don't apologize. Please do not apologize.
So yeah, from a culinary perspective, also, like if you were to take away the ethical stuff and the equity stuff, I would still be super passionate about coffee, because I think coffee is it's a culinary treasure. There's so much flavor to be found in it, and it connects the world in such a cool way. So if you think about wine, for instance, a lot of people talk about terroir and the flavors that you get from where wine is grown, how wine is grown, which I call social terroir, the way that people interact with the product and how that impacts flavor. Coffee is definitely the same. Everything that happens to it has a major impact on flavor. And for me, that kind of an adventure of like taking a trip, basically when you take a sip of a product, whatever that is, whether it's whiskey or coffee or wine, that's very intriguing to me, tasting that sense of where it came from. So yeah, I love coffee through and through for lots of reasons.
The terroir. I love how you said that, because when I explain things to people, especially in our neighborhood or our local community, I always like to say, because they ask me about the coffee, like, why is it different from an Ethiopian to, say, this Colombian? Or it could be the way I roasted it, the post-crack development. It could be all these things. But then also at the same time, I always make sure I mention the terroir, just like wine. Because you don't know the things that are in the ground could definitely affect what the coffee is being grown around.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Yeah, like, so for me, specifically, whenever I smell a Colombian coffee, I don't know why it is, but especially if it's from like Nariño, like around that area, I always smell chile, like a jalapeno or like just a chile pepper, because I'm half Native American, half Irish, but from Jalisco in Mexico. My grandmother has a ghost chili pepper plant in her front yard. Every year, my grandma's 93 and she makes her salsas.
Yum.
So hot, so good. All my uncles will be eating it.
That's my favorite.
They're like, "Ama, it's spicy," like they're getting all crazy with it. But that smell has been in my memory since a little kid. And so every time I smell a Colombian coffee, I get like a hint of a chile pepper, and nobody gets that for some reason. I'm like, I wonder, and I've always wondered, because I've never been to Colombia, but I've always wondered, like, I wonder if there's like some sort of chili peppers that are in the ground that are just part of that terroir. And I can identify them easier on a cupping table. So I love how you say that, because to me, also culinary is definitely a big part of it. Like, I love Chef's Table. When I was in Italy, I went to Chianti to go to Dario, I forgot his last name, but his restaurant, The Butcher.
Yep. Oh, cool.
It was super amazing. And again, wine, the cows, everything has a purpose and a meaning behind, and like they do it with conviction.
Yep.
And that's what I love about coffee specifically.
Yep.
So I might not be a James Beard nominated chef or a Michelin star nominated chef or whatever, but the way I express myself is through the coffee that you're tasting.
Yeah. And I think that's like the other end of that human connection too, just from like a culinary standpoint. Anything that we're consuming was created by another person that has like really devoted their life to that thing. If it's something of quality. And that's one of the things that's so special about really high quality coffees. And so when you drink that thing and you taste those unique flavors that pin it back to where it came from, you're really having a moment with the person that produced it.
Yeah.
And so going back to that idea of respect, just pausing and thinking about that, I think makes us all better. For some reason, I think just like the thought of us all being connected and interdependent and striving for excellence together is just such an encouragement, and I think it makes the world a better place.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I had to make it a very, very simplistic view of it. Like when you were talking about the social aspect of coffee. One thing I had this kind of I don't want to say renaissance, but like more of like an epiphany, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in the cafe one morning, and because we have such a small cafe, you've been there. I sit on like the last table when in the morning I'm like making my roast schedule for the day and doing these things. And some of our regulars came in, like our shout out Frankie. He's this cook who had his last day across the street, and he would come in every day, get his espresso. And then a couple other homies came in, a couple skate homies, a couple like regulars, whatever. And then everybody's talking, everybody like, and then at one point it's so loud in the shop, and it's like 7:15 in the morning, maybe 7:30, you know. And some people are hungover, some people are getting ready to go to work, some people are just, hey, how you doing, Kim? How you doing, Dave? Like, what's popping, you know? And then I had this epiphany, and I was sitting there, I was like, we're a bar.
Yeah.
But for how people start their day.
Yeah.
That you have your cocktail bar where people are ending the day talking about how shitty the day was at the end of the day, or what have you, or how great the day was. Let's celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I love the most about coffee is that you come in and you see people like hair all over the place, or something happened, and they'll just tell you their life because they see you every single day, and you become part of their life.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is so much a part of just even the deeper meaning of the coffee and where it's grown.
Definitely, especially in a period of time where everybody interacts digitally. There's just no touch point really beyond maybe the bar or a restaurant and a cafe.
That's a good point.
You know,
Yeah.
so it serves just such a special niche. The concept of that is referred to as the third place too. You know, you have your work, you have your home, but then if people have a sense of another place where they can go, that's their place, it makes people healthier. So yeah, cafe is that third place.
Well, you live longer if you're happy, right? You smile
Definitely.
more.
Yep.
And, I mean,
And you do better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember who told me this. It might have been Eric, my homie Eric. He said to me, the number one thing that people love the most to hear is their name.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll pay attention as soon as you say their name.
Yep.
And you know? Mm-hmm. And so when you come in, and I mean, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but it's like, if you're trying to run a business, what you want to do is create those locals who like, hey, how you doing, Kim? Oh, chaga today? All right, you got a chaga cappuccino, like, or a chaga latte or whatever. Or it's like, hey, Richard, how you doing? Espresso? Yep, just the regular. All right, cool. And then they come in and they're like telling you part of their life, what they're doing for the rest of the day. You might not know them, but you see them again every single day, and because you know their name, they come back.
That's right.
And they appreciate it. And it's even if you don't have good coffee, because they feel like that's their third place, they're like, oh, I'll look past it. But then when you have the good coffee, it's their third place, and you know their name, and you're accommodating and just friendly to them, you could change somebody's life right there.
That's for sure. And I think a lot of business owners and baristas may not even realize that if a person is a regular, they're not there for the coffee at all. Coffee is incidental at that point. They really, truly are there for you, for that connection that they have with you, with that space. You choose something culinarily, generally, out of a sense of adventure and a sense of finding something new and experiencing something. But those choices that you make that are more repetitious, that's a comfort thing. And that comfort comes from personal touch. So, yeah, it's something pretty special when you have a regular.
I couldn't agree more. Yep. I mean, I think it's interesting too, though, as the roaster, because, I mean, as you saw when you came to the shop, our roaster is integrated into the cafe to the point where there's no barrier. There's like, people can literally walk right up to me.
Yeah, you guys are crazy.
Super close. Yeah. Let me just say, it was a challenge, to say the least, at first. I didn't know how to deal.
Yeah.
But then now it's become to the point where it's like, I could still, I mean, sometimes I do mess up. I'm not going to lie. But that's part of roasting. But at the same time, it's become so integrated where like I can carry on a conversation. Hey, how you doing over there? Like, oh, hey, what's up? I I don't know. I'm drawing on their names right now.
Bobby.
But yeah, Susan. Susan, we do have a Susan. Hey, Susan, how you doing? Just a batch brew today? Okay, yeah, whatever you like. Okay, cool. Here's an Ethiopian. Boom. It's delicious. And then they come up and like the thank you, and they see what you're doing and doing these things. And it's just, as much as it might be a third place for them, I feel just as comfortable being there.
For
like,
sure.
you know, if I didn't, it's almost to the point where if I didn't do that now, I don't know who I would even be as a person, because I've done corporate.
Yeah.
I've done sitting in offices, and I'll tell you 100% of the time now that I've had the life experience that I have, if you were like, hey, I'll give you like $100,000 and you could sit in this office, but you're like, your communications are stuck to this 8 people and you're not continually growing every day by having different conversations.
Right.
Or they're like, I mean, maybe not this low of money, but like a smaller amount of money. And they're like, but you can work in this cafe, and every single day you get to see amazing people who like to share part of their life with you, and you get to share this amazing thing that you care so much about. Every single time I'm going to go with choosing the cafe.
Yeah. And I mean, frankly, if it wasn't that real for you, it would not be their third place. That's what makes it, is because it's legit. So yeah. And also, like, if you're messing up a few roasts because you're engaging with a customer, that's great, because like, again, it's a means. So that customer, if they were to be there drinking, think about it. If they're there drinking yesterday's roast that you messed up because yesterday you said hey to them, that's great. That's super cool.
Yeah, they're like,
yeah, exactly.
I put my own little touch on that.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's bringing that sense of terroir actually into your cafe, because you're still changing your flavor experience with the way that the, you know, social vibes are in your cafe.
Yes.
Yep. You're not making the coffee so precious that you're avoiding the person.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I feel like, I mean, we've met a couple times now. We've gotten to talk, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously don't know each other that well, but as a person who cares about coffee just as much, I feel like I already know you in the sense where it's like, we have the same passion. So automatically it's like, homie, you know, like, yes. Very, very interesting.
Page.
Yes.
We're on the same page.
We're on the same page. It's the one thing that's very interesting though, too, is like when you meet other people like yourself, especially like my homie Andrew at Mad Lab, he is eccentric and outspoken and very extroverted, and I am as well. But then we can get down and really explore coffee to a certain extent where it's not him telling me because he has more experience, but he's expanding, and we're collaborating more in a sense. So that all being said, my question to you is, did you have a mentor that really changed your perspective on coffee, especially when it came to roasting?
That is a good question. So I am kind of a sponge, and I've had a lot of really good people in my life. My first, I guess you would say, coffee mentor is a guy named Robbie Britt. Super nice dude who lives in Southeast Missouri. He helped me pull my first shot of espresso.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, yeah, he's definitely a good buddy. And then whenever I started roasting coffee, a guy named Andrew Timko really took me under his wing and helped me roast. He's the head roaster now for a company called Blueprint Coffee. And one of the other roasters at Caldy's Coffee Roasting Company in St. Louis, where I used to work. I'm from St. Louis originally. His name was Jeff Schaefer, and he had been roasting when I started roasting in 2008. He had been roasting for, I want to say maybe 12 years already.
Oh,
at
wow.
that point. Yeah. And he had roasted both for Caldy's and then for another pretty well-known company in Seattle area. So those guys helped me kind of kickstart my roasting passion. But really, I think the vocation that you find, people can mentor you in the vocation. That's really more of like a tutelage, but mentorship kind of is more about like how you become a better person. I think how you like work on your work ethic itself, or the way that you devote yourself to something, or kind of more of those head things and heart things than just like your skill. And so I would say my dad, is probably the biggest mentor, even though he's never roasted coffee in his life.
Yeah.
Just like how you devote yourself to something and become really good at it. So,
damn, that's amazing. I mean, to talk about not to like, it's not plugging, but just talking about what we're having going. It's kind of a renaissance that's going on at Seven Seas right now, because these two people that I work with on a daily basis, I've never worked with two other people that have helped just continuously push me to, in a sense where it's like, they can talk freely with me and be like, hey, friend to friend, or we can be like, hey, we're coworkers, and like let's vibe off each other. Like, yo, I did this pour over the Ethiopian at 212, and then we tried it and it was like, oh, it's a little bitter. But then we also I was like, hey, we'll drop it a couple degrees, and then we're like doing 210, and then it was like 206, and it's like, wow, 206. We had a 59-second post crack development time, super light roast, but the pour over tastes amazing at a 206, and it's like, that shouldn't be the case. And then it was like, but we're just vibing off each other, and it's like tasting more, and then adjusting, and it's like, I've never had counterparts that work so well all together. And instead of us like clashing, we're collaborating. And again, it's just such a vibe right now at the shop, and it's a really fun, exciting time to be there, especially because it is so much of a startup. I mean, the company only started in 2017, so what we're doing is pretty amazing in my eyes, because we have so much knowledge and things that we can pull from. Yeah, I'm getting to talk to you, and I'm going to apply everything that you're talking to me about, and definitely put it back into our shop and pass it on, educate, keep it going. Right. So it's like, it's very, very exciting. I mean, I did have a mentor, but at the same time, I do have, I'm 33, so I'm kind of like mentoring our manager in a sense but at the same time, I help teach her about coffee and palettes and profiling and stuff like that. But then I do jiu-jitsu with her as well. So it's like, I'm spending an extravagant amount of time with this person, but because of that, we're helping each other grow in so many different ways, whether it's our jiu-jitsu game or it's our coffee game. And it's like back and forth. It's like, how do you work with that person? And then our lead barista, he's like, try this, or he'll make a new drink and be like, oh, it's a little less sweet, or a little bit this. And it's just like, oh, it's exciting to collaborate with people and just keep the vibe going, because they have the same passion and attention to detail.
I think the other thing about that too is egos aside. If you have clashes, it's usually because you are demanding to be right and the other person is demanding to be right. But if you're collaborative, you're both invested in making whatever it is in front of you better. Yeah. And so that investment together, where you can set ego aside and you can make like the goal, that is your drive, as opposed to I want to be right. Man, that just makes whatever it is so much better.
Well, because they say like a rising tide raises all ships.
That's right. Yep. There's also a concept that I like to talk to people about, especially if they're talking about mentorship. It's called racers, pacers, and chasers.
Racers, pacers, and chasers.
Yep. So a racer is that person who's maybe mentoring you. They're kind of ahead of you in that game, whatever it is. They're outpacing you. They're racing ahead of you. But then that pacer is right beside you. That's your collaborative person that's like there in the weeds with you. They're kind of on the same level of skill, and you're growing together because you're pushing each other at the same pace. And then that chaser is the person that you're mentoring, the person that's kind of behind you. And we should all have those kind of people in our lives for whatever it is, whether it's like mental health. Going to a counselor is a great way to have a racer ahead of you who can kind of help you guide you down a path. Or whether it's just like having a little brother or whatever the case may be. Yeah. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's really exciting to be a part of something, especially in San Diego. The coffee scene there, I mean, you're in it every day, and what you're surrounded by and the people that you see, whether it's on social media or actually going around the local area, everybody's doing such good stuff, and you're just like, oh my God, it's exciting, and you're all working with each other, but still trying to like also run a business and do these things. And then it seems like it's oversaturated, but then you go to LA. Yeah. And then you want to talk about oversaturation. And this is not to throw shade, but it's like, even talking to Andrew last week, he's like, there's a cafe for every 400 people in LA, which means like sustainably you're going to run your cafe off of 40 customers a day. Maybe it's like, that's not sustainable. You talk about oversaturation. There's definitely a lot of oversaturation in LA. So then you look back at San Diego, it's like, there's still so much room for growth, especially being in California. Yeah. So it's exciting because like you go back with fresh eyes, and then I would talk to our team, And I would talk to Josh, and I was like, dude, he would be like, it's so saturated. It's like, but it's not. And you have to step out of the box to look inside, to like really look, and then really expand on what things are doing. And luckily, working with like, emerging markets, whether it's Laos or Mexico's having like a renaissance, if you will, of just amazing coffees from Chiapas or like other areas, and that are winning on like global scales of just like competitions. And not that it's a competition, but these regions that are not necessarily known for coffees are starting to shine through, and things are becoming a lot more exciting. And with, fortunately at Seven Seas, I'm able to work with different beans, Catullais, different Bourbons, Robustas, Catamores, things like that. So it's been a very exciting time. But, one thing too that I wanted to ask about is like, are you still roasting as much as you are?
So
you did, I should say.
I have a little sample roaster at my house right now that, now I'm back into green coffee, selling green coffee for a company called List & Beisler, and trying to build a U.S. entity basically with them. And so we only have 4 people here in the U.S. We're pretty sparse, and I have a sample roaster at home. So I grab samples, roast them in my house, cup them, and just trying to stay engaged with coffee that way. But one of the joys of my career, and one of the huge opportunities that I've had, both now and at the other green importing company that I worked for, is I travel a ton. And so I get to, sit next to roasters all over the world and see how they do it, see what they're struggling with, see what they feel successful in. I get to know the coffee before they get to know the coffee, and then taste the coffee at their expression of that coffee, and then talk to them about how they came to the conclusions that they did. And so I think that's been, from a roasting perspective, the most informative for me, is being able to roast on hundreds of different machines, tasting thousands of different coffees all over, is an education that very few people have had the opportunity to get. That's another reason why I feel it's almost like an obligation that I be an educator, because I want to try to vicariously give that synthesis of that kind of experience to the people that also would love to be able to experience that. So
yeah. Do you I mean, you have this wealth of knowledge. You know how things work intricately. You can jump on any machine essentially and roast these things. Do you still fail?
all the time.
All the time.
All the time. That's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to hurt a little, or you're not going to walk away learning, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you're a skateboarder.
Skateboarder, jiu-jitsu. Like I'm right now.
Yeah.
I tore the labrum in my shoulder.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. And then like I'm having my my physical therapist Katie helping with my rotator cuff.
That'll teach you.
Yeah. My jiu-jitsu coach Miguel, who's going to be coming on soon, he was always like, Gano, slow down. Anticipate. He's like, breathe and know when to explode and be strategic. And I've literally, as soon as like I got hurt, I was like, that's what he meant.
Yep.
You have to you can't explode all the time. And I mean, that translates to everything in life, right? Yep. So it's like, be strategic, know when to explode, do these things, and talk about learning and failing. And like, I constantly live in a state of being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah. Especially as I've gotten older, because it's like, you have to keep learning. Mm-hmm. You can't be stagnant. You have to keep progressing, if you will.
I think that also puts into you a sense of empathy. And I think the best educators out there are very empathetic, because you have to know how a person doesn't see something. Like, this is how a person is not understanding this thing. And so I need to bring this thing into understanding for them. And so I have to have a sense of how they're not seeing this. And the only way to do that is to conceptualize how you were not seeing it before you learned it. And so how have I failed, and how can I bring those failures to light in my mind continually, so that I can teach this person in a way that allows them to succeed at this? Yep.
Damn. You just hit me so deep with that right now, because I have without saying this person's name or anything like that, but I'm having a moment right now with one of our employees who's just not getting it. Mm-hmm. Like espresso blend, they don't understand these certain things. But as you're saying that to me, it's like the first thing I thought about is they're not in our shop every day. They're not around it. Okay, so let's bring them here. Let me show them the beans. Mm-hmm. Let them touch them. Yeah. And as you're saying this to me, I'm like, that's it. Yep. Figuring out how to let them learn. or to help maybe make them learn, because as much as people are very visual learners, they also maybe sometimes need to touch it.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I've exhausted certain ways of educating and it's not going through. Okay, so now touch.
Yep. For the majority
Yes.
of people who, have cognitive abilities to where they can learn, there are only 2 reasons that they don't learn. 1, they don't want to, or 2, their teacher has not explained it to them in a way that allows them to. So if you have an employee that is not learning something, the first thing to assess is it an attitude issue? Do they just not want to? Do they not care? And if they do care, it's your responsibility to find a way to make that happen. I think a lot of employers jump to the conclusion that the person is worthless or that they're a bad employee. And really, you're just a bad teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. So just be patient and find a way to communicate. It's all about communication, empathy, and.
Dude, I'm gonna make a note right now. I just thought of like all staff. Yeah, dude, I have to wow. Thank you so much, Joe. All staff education in South Park. In South Park with Creed. Okay. As you're telling me this, I'm starting to think of how I can reach not just this person, but even reach people who might not understand.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yep.
And bringing them in to the flagship, because I even think for myself, because again, going back to how you're involved so much with one certain thing, when you start to expand and get different locations, there's a disconnect between the flagship and every other location.
100%.
So it's definitely going to be bringing them in, making them feel a part of it, but also letting them know, be like, hey, you're just as important as everybody here, so I'm going to give you the same education.
Yeah. We call that information flow.
Information flow.
Yeah.
All right.
So how do you package information in a way that's effectively communicated to where everybody's on the same page? And how does that flow? So as you grow, you'll have to create systems that allow that information to flow succinctly and clearly to more and more different kinds of learners. And that's also another great way for you to learn, because then when you're trying to explain stuff, like you'll find yourself, you're going to try with this person you're talking about, you're going to start explaining blends to this person in a new way. And you, a priori, are going to learn from yourself about blends. It's magic. It's crazy, because you're going to start thinking about it in an empathetic way, to where you're almost going to think about it from their brain, and then you're going to see it from a different perspective, and it's going to be new to you in a different way, and it's going to inform how you think about blends. Damn. So I learn all the time from teaching. It's crazy.
That's
it's
so
like, how
sick.
do I gain knowledge from myself that I didn't have before I started talking about this thing? It's crazy.
Well, because you're collaborating, right?
Exactly.
It's a social aspect.
Exactly.
You're working with people and working and helping them. They're helping you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Damn. So,
I swear we're not smoking weed right now.
I swear, it's just getting so deep in the sense where it's like I'm learning from you as a person who's passing on knowledge, but at the same time we're collaborating, bouncing ideas off each other. Like, how is this? But it's also your knowledge. Again, this is, like I said earlier in the podcast, like the weeds, getting into the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain to you enough how much those Mill City Roaster School videos really just kind of, I don't want to say formulated how I look at things, but it gave me a general grasp and understanding when I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Even though
great.
I was touching it, and much to what you were saying, my head roaster just was like, watch those videos.
Yeah, I think one of my major hopes with those videos was really just empowerment, just to help roasters feel maybe not competent, but at ease to push themselves and to say it's okay to fail. It's okay to try this thing, or it's okay to, go with my gut and trust myself a little bit beyond what I think my abilities are.
Yeah.
Yep. Because again, then you do fail and you learn on your own.
Yeah, I mean, with everything, right? That's generally how it's going to be.
Just trying to push you out of the little baby roaster nest.
So, with your in-depth knowledge of like getting into the weeds,
Mm-hmm.
have you always been like a science nut, or was it just through the years you've learned this?
Literally since the time I was a very, very young child, I have been a science nut.
Really?
Yeah, when I was a little bitty kid, I would spend hours watching like nature programs and Nova and I mean, my favorite part of Mr. Rogers when he would go and show you how to make crayons or whatever it was, like the deeper questions about whatever it is, I have to know the answers. I have to. It's like a hunger. And I grew up actually in a very religious family in a rural community, in Missouri, outside of St. Louis, and, very kind of anti-science kind of situation in a lot of ways. But my mother is a nurse, and she had tons of nursing books. I read her like collegiate nursing books before I was 10.
Really?
I was homeschooled for much of my childhood, and so yeah, lonely nerd. And my dad was a maintenance guy at a hospital. And there was one day they were throwing out a bunch of microscopes, and he brought these like super cool high-powered microscopes home. And so I had 2 in my bedroom, and I would go through my mom's zoological books on like bacteria and single-cell creatures and protozoans and stuff like that. And then I would actually go out to the pond and try to find these creatures and look at them through the microscope. And I was labeling them all in the book.
Like Petri dishes and stuff like that? Yeah. Or like
put them on the
slides.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not bacteria. It wasn't that high powered, but I found all kinds of stuff. And then just nature in general. I was always outside in the woods, or I was nosing a book, studying about something in nature or something scientific, biological. And then I went to a public high school, and my freshman year jumped right into biology, which was a sophomore year class. And it was about 2 weeks in where my biology teacher kind of pulled me aside, and she was like, "Have you had biology before?" And I was like, "No, not officially. This is my passion in life, though." And she's like, "I don't think you should be doing these tests and homework. How about you be my assistant?" And I was like, "Yeah."
As a freshman?
As a freshman.
Wow.
And so I ran the biology lab for her for my freshman year. I graded all of her tests. I ran all of the dissections, and we did a lot, actually, believe it or not. I basically ran the class other than just the lecturing, and ended up with, I think it was 143% in the class.
What?
Yeah, I'm a nerd.
A++.
Yeah, I'm major nerd. So science has always been a passion of mine. It has never been like a drive to a job or to cash. It's always been just, I'm very hungry for knowledge. I have to know how things work. I have to know the idiosyncrasies of it.
That's amazing. So how did that, when you took that love of science, how did you, or I guess I should say, it's like, did you notice the similarities or between coffee and science, and that you could apply the things you already knew to this molecular structure of the bean and the cells and like all these things?
Yep. I mean, surface area, osmotic pressure, diffusion, extraction ratios, all of that kind of stuff was not a new concept in any shape or form.
Damn.
And so I was able to, I think I came at coffee kind of with fresh eyes, because most of the other baristas that I knew had never, they didn't have any kind of scientific background really, other than, I guess, being a normal student in biology.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And so those kinds of concepts were new to them, or kind of harkened back to something that they had maybe forgotten. Whereas whenever I was extracting espresso, in my mind, I was picturing exactly what was happening through extraction ratios and diffusion and all of the other things that were going on in that puck. And so that has also helped me be a good educator, is I can take those scientific concepts and meld them with experiential learning and bring a new level of light to a thing that somebody's doing and help them understand how to do it a little bit better.
Wow. I always kind of had that feeling because every time you get so into it, I'm like, dude, there's no way this dude doesn't know about science. Like, not, just watching you on YouTube and stuff. I mean, I loved science and I was always naturally gifted at it. It just made sense. I never worried about science when I was like, oh, like I need to do my science homework. And I understood it, but it was like so many other things that I was focused on that it was just like, oh, that's just whatever.
Yep.
I ended up getting like a grant, if you will, for biology
cool.
in the state of California.
That's rad.
But I didn't take it because I went to Penn State. So I was like, but then I think about it now and I was like, dude, that would have been so sick. Just like, as I got older, plus I was very like self-absorbed at the time where it was like, I want to be cool. Like,
wait, you were a college kid that was self-absorbed?
Not college. Like, this is high school. No, this is high school. Yeah. I was like,
even more.
I want to be so cool. And it just was like, not that at all.
Yeah.
So
I so wanted to go to school for science so bad.
Damn.
But my situation was due to like the super level of religion. My parents were pretty anti-college.
Oh, wow.
They were very strong in their belief that I was immediately needing to go into ministry and that I should not go to especially like a liberal college, that was not religiously focused. They thought I should go to like seminary or some kind of theology college. And so in order to go to college, I had to basically branch out on my own. And so I am also a singer and I won a free ride singing. So I went to school for vocal performance because I had to go to school. And so then I just took as many science classes as I could as my, semesters.
Extracurriculars kind of thing.
So yeah, I would have 18 to 21 credit hours per semester just to get as much science in as I could and also fulfill all of my music obligations to fulfill my
your credits.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Keep my scholarship.
I guess what kids like, you're like the goody two shoes kind of kid. Like
I was totally the goody two shoes. 100%. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
amazing though, because you were
100%.
Your passion was driving you to take extra classes because you were hyped on them.
Yep.
Not
Totally.
because you were like, oh, I need to do this to graduate.
Yep.
Like, I need to do this because I want to do this.
But then the other side of the coin was then I was going to like my English teacher and saying, what is the bare minimum of homework assignments that I need to do in order to get a C here? That kind of thing. So then I could devote more to the things that I wanted to focus on. Yeah. And just like the other classes that didn't matter to me, I was not going for a job. I was just going to learn as much as I could.
But it's funny about the English thing too, because you speak pretty eloquently.
Yeah. Well, that's why I went to the English, because I mean, that stuff kind of comes natural.
Okay.
So yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. I don't need these. I understand this. What can I do to get by here so that I can focus on these things I don't understand?
Dude. So, I mean, that actually leads me into my next question is, now that you've been in coffee for, it sounds like you said since 2001, so 19 years?
I would say vicariously since 2001 and officially since 2005.
That's what it was, sorry. So 15 years.
15 years, yeah, I've been paid for it.
So, but now, when you did, like, you have started to go down the craft cocktail area as well, and restaurants?
Yeah, so basically my first job that I took a check and checked in, basically punched a card, was McDonald's when I was 16 years old.
That was your first job?
It was first job.
Damn.
Other than like bucking hay and mowing grass and, the farm boy stuff. So 1996, I worked at McDonald's, and I've worked in either fast food or some kind of restaurant or service industry job alongside of college or other things that I've been involved in ever since 1996.
Damn.
Yeah. So
you were like almost, I mean, with a lack of better description, like born to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So even at McDonald's, I loved cooking burgers.
Really?
I loved it.
Wow.
I'm one of the only people I know that just loved being on that line. And we would get crushed, and I would be just, happy as a lark flipping those burgers.
Yep.
Yeah, cooking food for me is a passion.
Okay.
So I've always been a flavor nerd. And again, growing up poor, I don't think people really. I grew up in a very weird time, weird place, and weird situation where we actually did. I had to forage, I had to hunt and fish, and we had a huge garden, and we canned food all summer long. I grew up making, beef jerky and sausage and smoking it all, and
Yes.
that was my actual childhood. It's super like.
That's awesome.
It's awesome now. I hated it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hid it from all of the people, other peers my age. I hid it. I thought I was ashamed of it,
Really?
Totally. Yeah. You go to school. Yeah. If you're in ninth grade and you go to school and your lunchbox is full of like stuff from your garden that's like preserved.
Yeah, that's true. The garden part. I was like, well, the sausage and like the hunting of the meat. And I was dude, that's something amazing.
All of those things were just, hunting happened in my town, but usually people didn't, hunt just for the food. They hunted like
like sport
antlers on their wall.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
okay. Because I think more of it at the spats. Like, yeah, we're gonna eat this. Like,
yeah, I was eating squirrel.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
damn.
yeah, we were eating off the land. Yeah, we were living off the land.
Well, you had to survive, right?
Yep,
that's what you got to do.
Yep. So that meant we were cooking every day. I was in kitchen a lot. I really know how to cook in a lot of different ways really well.
Like game meat, especially too, which is tough.
Yep. Literally.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So if you want to cook a squirrel, I know how to do that.
Damn, that's crazy. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
it's cool now. Now looking back, I'm just so proud of it, and I it's hard now because I have kids of my own, and I'm not taking them hunting all the time, we live a pretty comfortable life. We can go to the grocery store and eat wonderful organic vegetables and, farm raised meats that we don't have to butcher. So the kids have a pretty normal American life.
Yeah.
But there's that part of me that's just like, man, I wish that I could just like maybe have a year with them in a cabin in the woods somewhere where I can teach them all these things. But now, now that I don't have to be out there doing those things, there's like that other side of me morally that's like, why would I just go out and kill something to teach them this stuff?
Of course. Of course.
So yeah, it's kind of tough.
I completely get it. I do have like the next thing I'm going to get into is going to be archery. Like,
cool.
100%.
My son takes archery actually.
Does he?
Yep.
Compound or like the other one?
He uses a longbow.
The longbow, yeah.
And then they have some compound bows too, but yeah, they're really working on longbow skills. But my daughter would also do it, but she's just not interested.
Yeah. The shooting a bow and arrow, especially for hunting purposes, is something that I'm like very interested in. Mm-hmm. But it's also like it's not to kill just to kill. Like it would definitely be like we need to live off this meat for like a year kind of thing, like being very much like using every part of the animal and doing these things.
You're gonna kill a big animal then.
Oh yeah, no, I got goals. Like I'm ready. Like not to kill the animal, of course, but like things that I want to accomplish as far as like hunting and like packing it out and doing these things and not even just doing it for my own self, but giving it to others.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's the next goal I think on the list of things to do. Mm-hmm. But you've gone into the restaurants and cocktail game, and you've made a cocktail for us here. Yeah. So is there a restaurant that you own now or like are part of?
I'm a very small minority owner of a super cool little spot in St. Paul, Minnesota called Hodges Bend.
Okay.
The number one majority owner, the main owner, is a guy named John. He goes by Chip Gabarino. He owns Topeka Coffee down in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
And he also owns another spot called Hodges Bend, and then he owns some other restaurants and bars in that area. Really cool guy. His brother-in-law, his wife's brother, runs and lives on a farm in El Salvador, like a group of farms basically that grows
co-op?
coffee. It's not really co-op. It's just like family-owned farms that kind of work together. I guess technically they are cooperating, but they run, like a business basically. And so they get the coffee from their farms. They roast the coffee in Tulsa. And so a lot of the coffees are directly from their own family's farms, which is super cool and interesting and unique in the U.S. But then also they roast lots of different coffees from different places. And then he is very involved in the food and cocktail world. And I guess going back to what I was trying to get at with all of my farm and hunting stuff is when you are kind of living off the land, flavor becomes a really important thing because things become very mundane. If you're eating out of canned stuff from your garden all winter long, you really start leaning into how do I add a little flavor to this?
Yeah, spice it up a little bit. Yeah.
How do I do that through either cook preparation, like cook style, or through whatever spices or aromatics that you're adding? And so you just start getting, I mean, dude, the myriad of ways I've made ramen soup.
Yes.
You know, or canned tomato soup. Just like adding a little of this and a little of that, and from a very early age learning how different spices and seasonings change things. Then when I became an adult, finding that in cocktails has been just amazing. And so earlier we had a drink together, and I said, you know, this drink is like kind of serendipitous to maybe some stuff we'll get into tonight. Well, we had an old fashioned.
Yep. The fig fashioned.
Yeah. Which the old fashioned was made with bourbon from Kentucky, and many of the barrels that are used in are the trees that are used for the barrels for Kentucky whiskey are from my area of Missouri, White Oak.
Really?
And and they were using maple syrup in that cocktail to sweeten it. And so whenever we would cook that maple syrup over that white oak, I taste that flavor so often in whiskey. It's like the flavor of home for me. And so the fact that they use that maple syrup to sweeten that old fashioned, like, really gives me an epic sense of home. I can taste that wood. I can taste the corn. I can taste the terroir itself.
Well, it takes you back to a sense of like a memory of like good times with your pops.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yep. My dad, he is a woodsy dude, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
He's probably outside right now. He makes tinctures, he calls them, but it's basically bitters, and it's old-fashioned medicines. And he has one that's made with cherry choke bark. So he will peel a choke cherry tree, and then you age the bark for a year because it has, I forget the poison in it, but why am I forgetting it? Anyway, it has this poison in it. You have to let it age so that the poison kind of
fades,
escapes.
Okay.
And then he tinctures it with really high alcohol bourbon. I think he uses right now, Wild Turkey 101.
Yes.
Because it's really high alcohol, and the alcohol acts as a solvent to extract all of the flavor out of the bark, and then you age that for like 6 months, and then you get this super intense, woodsy, cherry-like, Angostura bitters-like flavor, and he uses that with whiskey as almost like a medicine. And so that flavor also, whenever I would have a cold as a kid, I would get like a little shot of this whiskey with this choke cherry bark bitters in it. Can't even talk now. And so the old fashioned also has Angostura bitters usually, or some kind of bitters in it. And dude, it is such a taste of my home. It's such a terroir thing for me.
Did it actually work?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it'll knock out a cold for sure. Yeah, throw some honey in there, maple syrup. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe a little hot water, or
Squeeze
just straight
some lemon. Yeah, usually it would be hot water, that whiskey, the cherry or the choke cherry bitters, some lemon. It's basically a hot toddy, is what it is. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That's amazing.
That's my meds.
Dude, that works every time. Works every time.
But we didn't look at that as like drinking alcohol. My parents were teetotalers, and they would not drink alcohol. Alcohol was like not a thing.
Yeah.
And so looking back at the fact that I was drinking hot toddies and not even thinking about it, I drank it like it was medicine. I hated it. I didn't think about it as, I'm drinking whiskey right now. This is pretty badass.
As a young kid, you're killing it. I mean, even just saying that you're waiting 6 months, that to me indicates that your dad is a patient man.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Very, very patient man.
Big time.
That's awesome.
Patient, humble, emotionally intelligent, kind. Yeah, he taught me a different way of being a man. You know, I think a lot of men are hyper masculine and try to prove themselves. My dad had nothing to prove. You know, he still is just like very kind and generous and humble, and everybody that he's around just kind of feels his warmth. And he's not afraid to cry in front of people. He's not afraid to hug you and then like hug you a little too long. He's just a super warm dude. Yeah. And he's Italian. So
Okay.
yeah, his family is from Sicily. So he's got those long Italian hugs and talks with his hands a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. He's a really good dude.
Dude, that's super awesome.
Yep.
So like, you know, you've moved out of roasting a lot, but now you're into like bringing green and like doing these things with, what was the name of the company again?
Liston Beisler.
Yeah,
and I haven't roasted full time. Like I haven't been on a machine full time since like 2010.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So all of the roasting that I've done since then has been helping roasters learn how to do it better, or doing, like during my time at Cafe Imports, jumping on a machine to perfect a coffee so that we could drink it in the office and so that we could share more about it with our customers. So it's been basically experimental learning and teaching for, I guess, a decade.
A decade.
Yeah.
Dude, that is incredible. I mean, we're going to get a little nerdy in coffee in right now, but like out of all the machines that you've been on, you said it's been 100 machines. Do you appreciate more like radiant ceramic plates, or do you do like more burner rows, single drum barrels, double drum barrels? Like, does it matter to you at all, or do you have preferences?
Does not matter at all. And if you think about, well, we'll just talk about the first one you brought up. The radiant burners are only heating the drum.
Yeah.
They're not cooking the coffee. So it's still just heat coming off of either the air the coffee is exposed to or the drum material, just like an open burner drum. Heat exchange is a very interesting topic to talk about. And the manner in which heat is exchanged does change the way something cooks to an extent. And in coffee, that change is really kind of boiled down to time. Time, I guess, and absorption from the outside to the inside. So if you move very, very quickly, the outside's going to get overcooked, the inside's going to get undercooked. If you move very slowly, it's all going to cook very uniform, but it may cook too uniformly and be just flat and boring. And
Baked.
So, exactly. Yep. So when it comes to a system, the system needs to be controllable in a way that allows you to have your cook time happen effectively to your end goal of flavor. So whether you have an IR burner, or whether it's a halogen bulb that's heating, or whether it's a air roaster, all of these things kind of just boil down to how does the system operate and allow the systems manager, the roaster, to functionally make choices. So I think that you can roast, and I have very strong data backing me up on this. I have roasted the same coffee on many different machines, and it tastes the exact same way. It's not the machine.
Regardless.
It's not the machine. It's the operator. And on the same token, you can take the exact same coffee on the exact same machine and make very small tweaks and have it taste totally different.
Yeah.
So it's all about the control of the operator. I like to say that there are three things that a very highly qualified roaster, or what a lot of people would maybe call a master roaster, needs to understand. That's the green coffee itself. So what am I putting in the machine? What is the potential of this coffee? The machine itself. So how do I manage this machine, and how does heat move through it? And then how to taste. And your taste is really how you put all of those things together. If you can master those three different areas, then you are going to be a very proficient roaster.
Do you also believe, though, I mean, putting maybe like the hard data and the facts behind that, maybe putting it aside, do you also believe in maybe like, again, because it's the system operator, correct, as you just stated, would you say there's a certain aspect of energy that goes into it, like a positivity almost, like somebody who is like really has a passion for it, it might taste a little bit different as opposed to a person who's just like trying to get through the roast and get through the day.
Yeah, you're getting a little metaphysical here, and I like it.
Honestly, because I believe
really
that.
do believe that.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that. I think that what energy you personally bring to a thing is manifest. And if you think about that from the farm all the way through, that becomes a really cool thing. You know, this is one of the reasons why, like, on Sunday, I'm taking a whole bunch of roasters to meet a whole bunch of farmers in Honduras. So I think that collaborative energy that we share inspires more positive energy. And so if we are humans together in this effort to make something beautiful, then that aesthetic endeavor that we're on will truly manifest in something that tastes better. So if I go up to a machine and I'm just angry, I think people can taste that in the coffee. I really do believe
Yes, I completely agree in that. I mean, whether it's the music that's playing in the background or like if it's like setting the wrong vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could argue like, well, maybe if I'm angry, I'm paying a little less attention, you know, and maybe it's just like an incidental thing that it tastes off. Or we could argue that literally your actual attitude is creating an aesthetic flavor compound somehow metaphysically that actually manifests in how somebody experiences it. I think that there are two extremes to argue with that. I don't think it matters. I think that it matters that it actually happens.
It really does.
Regardless
yes.
of what is the cause and effect, we know that the effect is in congruence with the attitude. So
yeah. I mean, because, especially you're so scientifically driven and you speak so, again, eloquently about coffee, and you can get real in depth about cell structures and flavor profiles and tastes and heat exchange, things like this. But then at the end of the day, also, it's like I always draw back from my mentor, which is this guy, Steve Rail. He owns Zoom Bar Coffee and Tea in San Diego. And I would just like pick his brain, like, because I was telling you before the podcast, I started roasting on a Probat L12 refurbished 1950 roaster, and you know, it wasn't until the head roaster came in till they got like different bean probes installed, and then like got a tracking system, and started to become more specialty coffee in a sense, although they were always specialty coffee.
Yeah, you had more control.
More control, had more data to back what was doing.
Yep.
But then I would like take it as like the third roaster. I would like I get to roast with him, and I just ask him questions and this, that, and this. And I had so many questions at so many points. And at the end of the day, he just looked at me and he was like, just like shrug his shoulders, you know, How did you get that? And he's just like, it's just how I was taught. But then he said something to me that was very significant. And he said to me, at the end of the day, does it taste good in the cup?
Exactly.
As like, put everything aside. Does it taste good in the cup? So it's like, I had the scientific head roaster, I had your videos, and then I had the surfing owner of the shop who loved what he did, would leave in the middle of the day, go surf for an hour, come back, and then just do his thing.
Yep.
Like kind of like a mad scientist. So it was like this balance of data versus energy versus, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just all kind of combined into like what I consider my roast style today.
Well, let's take a journey. So
I'm down.
So whenever I first got into roasting was a pretty mysterious thing, and nobody really knew how it functioned or how to teach somebody else how to roast. And it was really a journeyman style that you would learn. You would saddle up next to somebody and they would do that thing like you just explained, which is like, I don't know how it tastes good like this, but we're just going to do this thing over and over because that's how I magically made this taste good.
Okay.
But then in the effort, I think, to explain things, people started applying non-truths to how an outcome would taste. So whenever somebody would say, why does this taste this way? The person would explain it, and it would be just nonsense, not scientific at all. And these kinds of non-scientific educational points began to get prolificated all throughout coffee, to where people were teaching roasting, but they were teaching super weird things. And there are still things like this that exist. Like, for instance, the concept of pyrolysis. There is, whenever you go into second crack, what is taught by many roasters out there is that you go through a process called pyrolysis, which is a process where the energy created by the reaction is high enough to where it sustains itself in another reaction. The actual pyrolysis, like if you turn on your burner at your house and it's a flame, that flame stays ignited because the molecule that just caught on fire ignites the next molecule behind it. And so it's like a
continuous process.
Yeah. That's pyrolysis. That's not what's happening in coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee's not actually on fire. And so there is no pyrolysis happening in coffee, but there's this concept of pyrolysis, and that has been pinned to the word pyrolysis for a totally different reaction. That's just one example. So all of these examples existed out there. And when I started hearing all of these things, I was just like, that's not right. That's not real. That doesn't make sense. And so that's another reason why I started getting into educating roasters more and trying to draw out, okay, what are these like wives' tales? What are these things that people are calling one thing that are actually another? And how can we collectively, without destroying people's egos and telling people that they're wrong to their face and stuff like that, how can we collectively work on changing our language to where the new generations of roasters that come up have access to good, clean, clear information that's not just a metaphor, but that is actually the reaction that's really happening, so that they can control the process better. So then it's not
have a better
magic.
understanding.
Yeah. Then it's not magic that you get that really good roast. You can apply science to it and make a choice to roast the coffee how you want. So I kind of looked at it like, if you're in a dark room and somebody hands you a box of crayons and tells you to draw a rainbow, you may be able to, once every 500 times, draw an actual rainbow. The chances are slim.
Yeah.
But I just want to turn the lights on.
Yep.
So then you can choose whatever colors you want. You can kind of guide your own process. And so, yeah, that's what I've tried to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
but at the end of the day, sorry to interrupt.
No.
At the end of the day, what your mentor said is absolutely true, because once you understand all of the concepts, then you can just draw a rainbow. You don't have to worry about all of the science. Like, I'm not sitting there thinking about cell structure when I'm roasting a coffee.
Yeah.
I'm smelling it and I'm making a like gut reaction adjustment from the culinary experience that I have to change the roast pattern in some way to draw out a new flavor or to control a flavor.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, because I've just recently, specifically to draw back on a more recent experience, I was roasting this Ethiopian. It's a Sidama. It's a natural. And I have always, like, when I was taught to roast on this Dietrich IR5, I was taught do it, in a systematic way. Once I systematically did it, I was like, well, I can adjust it in certain things, but I had a roaster come in, again, my friend Andrew of Bad Love Coffee, and he's like, well, why don't we just do this? Do like a 50 here, and then do the 0 here, and like, or just like, pass first crack, turn the air off. He's like, there's still air going in there, and like did a lighter test.
Yep.
Gave me a new way to think about it, because of the fact that, like, compared to that ProBat L12, that had 2 air settings, air dampers that are like completely on opposite sides, and then you go to the Dietrich IR5, which is like a Tesla, and that thing is just 3 settings, and it's like, okay, why don't you maneuver these, and why don't you manipulate them accordingly? So it's started to give me new insight to doing these things. The one thing too that I did want to talk to you about, I guess it could be a little bit metaphysical as well, again, on that subject, is that I'm a heavy believer now in people who are going to dramatically affect maybe not even just like your outlook, but your thought process in life. They affect it so dramatically, and maybe it might just be for a very minimal time. They come in there and they change the way you think, or they change the way they give you a new idea, and that completely redirects the path that you were going, and you might not even see that person again.
Yep.
Has that happened to you? And
I guarantee it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think every time that I teach somebody something, just like trying to look at it from a different angle, or maybe a question that they ask, or a way that they come back to me and say, oh yeah, I understand that because this and this and this, It's always collaborative. So you're constantly changing, you know? I think that's another thing when we talked about collaboration and ego being the antidote basically to collaboration. Whenever you have that ego of like, I know and you don't know, and it's my job to inform you of a thing, then you kind of put a wall up basically, and you don't change, and people just get ingrained in whatever they know, and they kind of do the same thing the same way forever and ever, and they stop growing and they become irrelevant. And so just having that like openness to, we're learning together. I'm just going to share my perspective with you and the way that I see this and some helpful things that have helped me do better at this job. But I'm also open to hearing anything that you have in terms of feedback and what you're perceiving and how you're tasting the coffee or whatever the case may be. That collaboration will constantly refine you. It's that iron sharpens iron thing. Yep.
Damn, I like that. I like that right there. I mean, is there still, I mean, I know you have 15 years experience and you're constantly talking about how you're still learning. How much more do you think you have to learn about coffee?
Oh my God. I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface.
Barely scratching the surface.
Everybody in coffee would probably say that. Yeah. I think we're still living in the dark ages when it comes to coffee, for sure.
Really?
Yeah. I think that we are very ill-equipped and lacking so much knowledge and information, you know?
Is it area specific or?
Well, just take this as an example. If you think about coffee, there are, some people estimate maybe 800 flavor compounds available in coffee. So that means 800, what is it, cubed is your, 800 to the 800 power is your possibility of flavor in coffee. That is a huge, vast amount. So how can I, as a roaster, control that flavor? It's always accidental.
Yeah.
You know, to an extent. I can control it to the point where this is now acceptable to me. I like this expression of this coffee. So I've tracked my roast, and so I can kind of repeat this and get it close to that expression again. But to understand it to the point where I can actually decide what of those flavors I want to control and how, and then do that also through the brewing process, do that also through the growing process, or maybe choose what flavors I want to put into the coffee through a matrix of variety, soil type, water input, roast profile, processing, all of those things. It's an endless labyrinth of choices that you can make that we're barely scratching the surface of knowledge on.
I just got so excited because it's like, oh, these things that you're talking about, it's like, that's what gets me pumped every single day. And I'm just like, oh shit.
And the people that are out there that think and kind of tout that they know it all, dude, that's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, the one thing I constantly found, I thought it was maybe like imposter syndrome because it's like, I haven't been in coffee that long. I've been obsessed with coffee my entire life. It's been intricate and it's been very integrated into my life since I was 5 years old, from making my mother coffee and going on. But when I finally got into coffee, I felt like I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be, whether it was learning about the coffee or expressing myself through the roast that I'm doing. But sometimes I feel like my obsession with coffee has gotten me to where I'm at in my life, but at the same time, or positions that I work in and things that I've done. But sometimes I'm like, when people look at me and I'm like, well, we need an answer about this, or like, what about this coffee? I'm like, shit, I don't know. Like, I feel like, oh, I don't know as much as I do, but I'm always constantly learning and constantly trying to adapt and relay the things that I know. But it's just like you said. I mean, there's still so much to learn every single day. But then I realize it's not about knowing everything. It's about explaining and educating and passing on the things that I do know, because it's like you and I did not start this.
Yeah.
We're stewards essentially of a craft, and we're passing it on to the next person. So hopefully they can improve on it.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. If you're a coffee professional at home listening to this right now, do this experiment for me long term. Think about the number one how to brew video that you think is the most correct. Mark that down today and say, this is the correct way to brew. And then revisit that 5 years from now. I guarantee you will think your way of thinking now was so wrong. And I know this because I have been around the block and I have been so sure this is the way that you brew. This is the way you pour a Chemex. This is the way you pour a V60 or whatever the
AeroPress, whatever method of brewing is.
There's no right way that we're doing this, and our ways hopefully are going to become more and more right, but we're also going to stumble upon all kinds of new methods and new flavors and new coffees and roast profiles, and all of this stuff is constantly evolving. So as soon as you settle into something where you're like, okay, this is the right way, that's the only time that you know 100% that you're actually wrong.
Yeah, because it's like, no, there's still more.
Yeah. Keep digging, keep being open. That doesn't mean don't do something in a repetitive way. If it's the best way that you know for right now, that's great, but just be open. Continue to be open and flexible so that you can continue to grow and strengthen in your abilities. Yep.
When I was learning how to make pour-overs, I got completely obsessed, and I would just do pour-overs every day, and that was like my first year or two in coffee. And then now to fast forward, our manager of our shop, her name's Leov. I don't know at what point, but she was like, I need to start figuring out how to do pour-overs. And within the last 3 to 4 months, I think she's come up with 2 or 3 different methods. She's combined certain methods. She found this method or she found this method. And then she got trained on a different method to now the method that we're doing at the shop. But compared to how I was doing them, even like close to 4 or 5 years ago, to now is like, use like a stir stick to pop the bubbles to get more CO2 exposed, and to like, doing swirls and doing this, or like brew temperatures and things like that. I never thought about that, and things were not brought to light. And then fast forward, Leov's over here doing it, and it's like just keeping it going, keeping expanding, keeping learning, and just keeping methods evolving.
Yep.
And it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be there. I mean, even if we're still so far away, it's still an extremely exciting time to continue the process of learning.
That's right. And the fact that you pin the word excitement to, being wrong is exactly the path that we should all be on.
Yeah.
Because if we can encounter a point at which we're wrong, we have 2 choices: remain wrong and be angry, or be excited that we saw where we were wrong and learn and grow.
I think we'll end it right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Joe,
thanks so much for having me, man.
Dude,
great.
This has been, like, to say the least, an invigorating conversation.
Good.
Yeah, an exciting conversation for
Good.
me. I mean, I honestly feel like we can keep going, but I know you got to go.
Got to run.
You got to run.
Got another thing to get to.
So I just want to say thank you again so much for your time.
For sure.
Thank you for being a part of all of this. And, man, this will not be the last time we chop it up.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes.
See you next time.
Yes, and I always do. Boom. Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah.
Peace. Yes. Thank you so much, Joe. That was an amazing conversation. I can't say how much I appreciate you taking your time to come onto the show. He did 2 podcasts or 1 more podcast before mine. I mean, that dude is a legend in between a coffee competition. Legend. Thank you again to the sponsors of Caffeine and Green, Thorn Street Brewery, 7 Seas Roasting Company. And of course, last but not least, thank you to all you beautiful people out there who continue to support Caffeine and Green. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on any social podcast platform, Instagram, Caffeine and Green Podcast. And if you haven't already, head over to that YouTube, Caffeine and Green Podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Caffeine and Green is what it is. Spread that word. And I will be back on the road for next week in LA. Caffeine and Green on the road is going back on the road, baby. Let's get it. Thank y'all. Peace.